Brothers and distinguished guests, it is my distinct pleasure to welcome you all here to the Pi Kappa Alpha Memorial Headquarters. And I know for many of you, based on some hands that were raised last evening, this is probably your first trip to the Memorial Headquarters, including our special guest, but hopefully it won't be your last. And there's much to see here, from the original founding minutes of our fraternity to, I know in the library many of you enjoyed taking a look at some of your chapter scrapbooks. Tonight, however, as I mentioned, we have a very special presentation. Seated up here beside me is a true American hero and our brother, Colonel Mike Hopkins. Brother Hopkins is a United States Space Force colonel and NASA astronaut. Colonel Hopkins made his first space flight as a flight engineer on Expedition 3738 from September 13 to March of 14. Most recently, he was part of the Crew Dragon Resilience, which launched on November 15th, 2020, and returned on May 2nd, 2021. While I'm sure he will share some of the details of those missions with you, I thought it would be worth highlighting that on December 18th, 2020, Mike became the first astronaut to transfer from the Air Force to the Space Force in a ceremony aboard the International Space Station. You should know that since his days at the University of Illinois and when Mike was initiated into the Beta Eta chapter in 1988, everything he has done and everything he has been associated with has been built on the values of service, leadership, commitment, hard work, and achievement. Whether it was receiving the Big Ten Medal of Honor from his days playing football at U of I, which recognizes one male and one female student from the entire graduating class of each Big Ten school for demonstrating joint athletic and academic excellence, or receiving his master's in science and aerospace engineering from just this little place called Stanford, working on advanced space systems in New Mexico, his work with the Canadian Test Flight Center, or being assigned as a special assistant to the vice chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, or any of his many achievements as a U.S. Air Force commander and NASA astronaut. Now, some of you may have been at the 2018 convention in Richmond, where Mike was presented with the 2018 Distinguished Achievement Award for Pi Kappa Alpha. And some of you may also know that Mike is making his second appearance in a row at a chapter executives conference. Now, last year it just happened to be on the phone via Zoom to kick off the virtual CEC directly from the International Space Station. I can tell you personally, that is one of the coolest Pi Kappa Alpha experiences that I have ever had and likely ever will. When Mike initially proposed the idea, we had a couple of test calls from space. I left every one of those calls grinning ear to ear, thinking to myself, and probably telling everybody that I saw, man, I was just talking to an astronaut in space. And to further illustrate what type of man Mike Hopkins is, a few weeks after kicking off our CEC, we set up a call on a Saturday morning with my kids, who were here, and he spent 30 minutes with my then 8 and 10-year-old talking about life in space and some of his missions. Talk about dominating show and tell at school. Not sure anybody can beat that. Now, on to the real reason that we are here. And I understand Colonel Hopkins has a few things that he would like to present the fraternity for placement in our museum, along with some words to share about mission, leadership, and fraternity. Brothers and guests, please join me in welcoming our brother, Colonel Mike Hopkins.
Okay, so sending people to the International Space Station, sending things to the International Space Station is pretty expensive. My first mission on a Soyuz, the Russian Soyuz launched out of Kazakhstan, my seat cost the NASA, the U.S. taxpayers, I don't know if many of you are taxpayers yet, but your parents, it cost $75 million for me to go to the International Space Station. When you send supplies up, a pound of supplies going to the International Space Station, it costs about $25,000 each pound that you send up there. And so when you get selected to go to space, you feel pretty fortunate. And it gets even better because they give you an opportunity to take some objects up with you, your own object, whatever you'd like to take with, something personal. They let you take to space. And to give you an idea, you're obviously going to think long and hard about what do I want to take up there. And usually it's about 5 to 6 pounds or so. So the government's going to spend $150,000, $200,000 for you to take some personal objects up into space. So you don't want to choose things that don't have meaning to you. And to give you an idea of some of the things that I took up. So my father was a Marine back in the early 60s. Then he flew A4s. And I was selected in 2009 to be an astronaut. And he passed away in 2008. And so on that first mission, I took up his logbook, what he had recorded his flights in the Marines. And I recorded my flight on board the International Space Station in this logbook as well. And the story doesn't end there, though, because brought that back with me. And then just recently, my oldest son graduated last May from Michigan and commissioned into the Air Force and is now going through pilot training. And he recorded his first flight in the T6 in that same logbook. So hopefully that kind of gives you a sense of some of the types of things that we select to take up there. Another object I took up was a friend of the family. And you're going to see some of those if you look in some of the rooms. A Purple Heart. This was a gentleman that was a Marine in the Pacific Theater and was wounded on Peleliu, was wounded on Okinawa, and so it was an honor and a privilege for me to take one of his Purple Hearts up with me. And so it was a pretty easy decision on my part to call up Justin and ask him if there was anything that I could take up for Pikes. And so I do have a few items here that have been to the International Space Station. They have orbited the Earth for 168 days. They've gone around it more than 2,600 times, traveling at 17,000 miles an hour, and they traveled over 70 million miles. And so, Justin, if you'd come up, I'd like to present to you a couple of those things. Now, some of them are pretty simple, and these kind of things, they are, thanks, Mike, they are, it doesn't seem like much, but these are some of the perfect items to take up to space. And so these are just some of the stickers that I took up. And so if I could leave that with you, and And then also we have the flag. And so you'll see on the picture on the wall there, I think some of the handouts that they were providing as well was a picture of this flag. And so again, it has been up in space, and it's traveled over 70 million miles. And so if we can, real quick, I'll step around and we'll I'll present this, and we can take a picture with it. And let's see, look right? Does that look right, guys? Okay. All right. Thank you. So I'm not done here, so Justin, if you would stay up here. I do have a couple things that I'm going to present to Justin. I don't know if you guys are familiar with challenge coins, but challenge coins are a tradition that goes back to really World War I from a military service, and so basically it is a coin that kind of represents your squadron or your unit that you belong to, and you're always supposed to carry it around with you. And so this is a challenge coin this one's mine. And it's from this mission, so that's a challenge coin from Crew 1. Anyway, so you always carry it around with you, and the tradition is that if you're at a bar, and if I put my challenge coin down on the bar, and my crewmates don't have theirs, then they're buying the rounds. So I also happen to have a couple of challenge coins here that I'd like to present to Justin, and there's a reason why I want to present these to him. First of all, Justin is a role model, and too often, we look at people with fame, people with money, people with power for our role models. And you guys don't have to look that far. You got someone right here. He is a man of faith. He's a family man. He's a fraternity guy. And so I think he represents everything that all of you can look up to. And so, Justin, I have a challenge coin for you that this is also from Crew 1. And so this one has also traveled around the world 70 million miles, 2,600 times as well. So for everything that you do and being that great role model, there's that challenge coin. So don't go anywhere. I'm not done yet. So there is I've got also one here as a Pike challenge coin, a Pike Cap Alpha 1. This one has also been into space, and I'm giving you this one for leadership and being the leader that he is, because being a leader, which I think a lot of you are probably finding out right now, is not very easy. And quite frankly, there's a lot of people that don't do it very well. And trust me when I say that Justin does it extremely well, and I think he's been the right person at the right time for this fraternity. And so, Justin, this one is just for your leadership and everything that you have done as well. So, you bet.
I don't have anything to exchange, so it looks like I'm buying drinks tonight.
I like that. Okay, hey, let's. So those are the kind of presentations I want to give, but I do want to spend a little bit of time, as Justin mentioned. A year ago, I was in space. I was talking to this crowd then, and this, to be honest with you, this is much better because you get to see the faces, you get to interact, you get to know if your jokes work or if they don't work. But when you're talking on the phone like that and not being able to see any of the faces, it's just not quite the same. So, a lot of times you'll hear how amazing it is to go to space, and I promise you it is. But also I will promise you that coming back to Earth is much, much better. And there's not a better place to be. But I had the opportunity to be the commander of the SpaceX Crew Dragon Resilience. But what's that really mean, right? A lot of this conference is about leadership and about being that role model for your chapter houses and all of that. And so I'm going to share just a couple of stories with you, and then we're just going to open it up to any and all questions that you guys might want. But so Victor Glover and I, we were assigned to this Crew 1 Dragon mission back in 2018, August of 2018. And we were very lucky because we got to help develop, to test the vehicle. And that's not something you get to do every day. And so as a tester, that was a dream come true for us. But we also knew that our crew was going to grow. It was going to be a crew of 4 someday. But we didn't know when that was going to happen. And it turned out that in March of 20, now remember, you heard we launched in November. We were actually, at that time, in March of 2020, we were supposed to launch at the end of July. We finally got our other 2 crewmates assigned to us. And one of those crewmates, and there's about 40 or 50 astronauts, active astronauts at any one time. One of those crewmates that got assigned, I'll be honest with you, is someone that I didn't really get along with. And so if I had a choice of who I was going to pick to go spend 6 months in a tin can with, it would not have been this astronaut, right? And so from a leadership standpoint, what do you do? I could have maybe gone in and talked to the chief of the office and maybe tried to get someone else assigned to it, because the human dynamics is very important when you're going up into space, and quite frankly though, that applies to what all you guys do as well. And the first couple of training missions didn't go real well. You could feel some of that tension in there. And so I sat down with this crewmate, and we just had a talk, and we talked about our history. You couldn't ignore that. And we talked about what we wanted to get out of the mission. We talked about how we could go about that mission and how we could make it successful. And so, quite frankly, that talk, that sitting down and just having a conversation with someone that I didn't get along with, changed the whole dynamic. And so, from a leadership standpoint, I think you can go online and you can look up leadership traits and all of that kind of stuff, and you can come up, there's 10, 15 different things that a good leader needs to have, and I'm too simple for that. I can't remember that many things. So I usually try and kind of focus on just 2 or 3 things that I am core principles that I'm going to stick with, and one of them is to lead by example. And this was a case of that, right? Because if I wanted this crewmate to trust me and to believe in me, I needed to do the same thing to them. And so by sitting down and having that conversation, we realized that we really weren't as far from each other as we thought we were. And so I encourage you to remember to be that example as the leaders. And now I'm going to take you to the next, which was a cool bit, that kind of my other characteristic that I like to talk about. We were in training, and we were doing a sim. We were doing a docking sim. And so we're coming up, and we're at the 20-meter hold point. So that means we're 20 meters away from the International Space Station. And we're sitting there, and we're waiting for the go to dock. But we've got, as you can imagine, it's a simulation, and so there's some malfunctions that have come up. And so we get the call from the ground, hey, we're investigating this, stand by. And so we're standing by, and as a crew, we're like, okay. And I think what I mentioned to everybody was, I said, okay, we're going to Mark Watney this. So hopefully all of you have seen The Martian and you understand who Mark Watney is. I said, we're going to Mark Watney this. And so what was absolutely fantastic about it, probably one of my favorite moments of our training flow, was one of the crew members, Shannon Walker, she mentioned something. And it's like, oh yeah, we need to think about that. And that caused Victor Glover to mention something, and that caused Suichi to mention something. And all of a sudden we had a solution that we called down to the ground, and they hadn't even thought about that. And so I think that's one of the other things that as a leader that you have to do, and that's to be a good listener. It's not all about being the guy that's doing all the talking. It's not about being the guy that has all the answers. Sometimes to be a good leader, you have to just you have to listen. And that was a case where I didn't have any of the ideas. The rest of the crew did, and it was an extremely successful simulation, and it was probably one of the highlights that we had. And so I encourage you to think about that for all of you when you go back to your fraternities. As the leaders, it doesn't mean you're always doing all the talking. Sometimes you do need to sit back and listen a little bit to what everybody else is saying. So enough of that, though. Let's talk a little bit about the mission itself. So you did hear that we launched in November of last year. This was the first operational mission with the Crew Dragon Resilient, with the Crew Dragon vehicle. So there was 4 of us on board. That took us up to the International Space Station. That took us about 27 hours to rendezvous with station. And when we got there, we joined a crew of 3 that were already there. They had launched on a Soyuz. And they had been there about a month by the time we joined them. So now we're a crew of 7. And basically on board station, it's about science. It is a national laboratory, and it's all about science. It's about science that is going to benefit life down here on Earth, but it's also about science that's going to help us get back to the moon and get on to the Mars, which maybe, quite frankly, you guys are the right age, the right generation for being that first person to someday step foot on Mars. And so that's what we're doing up there, is that science, but we also have to do a lot of maintenance. And so, believe it or not, the space station, I don't know how many of you know this, but it's been up there. The first module was launched in 1998, which I'm guessing is before a lot of you were born. And so it's really weird if you think about it. Most of you haven't known a time when there's not a U.S. astronaut that's been up in space. And that's pretty unique for those of us that are older to think about that it's been going on for that amount of time. But it's also old then, and so there's a lot of maintenance that has to happen. And so while we're up there, we got to go out and do, there was 5 total spacewalks on this particular mission. I did 3 of them. And so combined that with my first mission, I've been outside the space station in the vacuum of space for 5 spacewalks, 32 hours or so that I've spent outside. So that went extremely well, and the mission overall went well. We had a lot of firsts while we were up there. It was the first 4-person crew, operational crew. It was the We set the record for the length of time that a U.S. capsule had been in orbit. We did the first night splashdown since 1968 with Apollo 8 for the U.S. And so it was just an absolutely fantastic mission. And so what I'd like to do right now is just kind of open it up for questions. Justin, Mike, you guys, let me know how long I have, and when we're done, I'm going to close with just another couple little stories. And so there is no question that is off the table. So I know you guys are probably out there got the bathroom stories or something like that. Don't hesitate to ask those. I am more than happy to answer any and all questions. Yeah, go ahead.
Was it hard to get the flag to sit still?
Was it hard to get the flag to sit still? It is, actually. It's hard to get anything to sit still when you're floating. And that's probably one of the most unique things, but probably what you don't see is, and we call it gray tape on orbit. That's actually duct tape, but as NASA, we can't say duct tape because that's a trade name, and so we can't sponsor duct tape. So there's probably some duct tape that's holding that to the walls to keep it from floating around. So yeah, you usually try and you have to cheat a little bit to get things to stay still while you're up there. Yeah, in the back there.
This is my one opportunity to ask an astronaut. So, did we actually go to the moon?
Did we actually go to the moon? That's a great question. Yeah. Well, let me tell you, if we did not, then I cannot believe the amount of work it would take to maintain that hoax for the amount of time they have. But the reason I'll tell you that I don't believe that's a hoax, when you first get selected as an astronaut, you go into a 2-year basic astronaut training program. And part of that training for us was lunar geology. 2 of our instructors were Harrison Schmitt, who was on Apollo 17, so he was one of the last people to walk on the moon, and Dave Scott, who was Apollo 15. And so both of those gentlemen had spent a lot of time on the moon. To make that story even more incredible, at Johnson Space Center, which is where we're based out of, which is south of Houston, we actually have a vault there that has all of the moon rocks that were collected during the days of Apollo. And they're all, they're behind glass and in a protected environment so they don't corrode and things of that nature. And so to go in there, you have to put on the bunny suit and all the protection and that kind of thing. And so we're literally standing in this vault, and Dave Scott, we're sitting there looking at this rock. It's called the Genesis rock, and it's probably the most important rock that they picked up from the moon and brought back. And Dave Scott is telling the story of where he was and what he was doing when he picked up this rock. And it's an amazing story. They were out on their buggy, and ground control had come up and said, "Hey guys, you gotta head back to the lunar lander. You're getting short on time." And so they're driving back over the lunar landscape, and he sees this rock out there. But he knows that if he calls up and say, "Hey, I need to, I see a rock, I want to pick it up," that mission control is going to say, "Nope, we don't have time. You got to get back. Oxygen's short." So he stops the vehicle, calls down, and says, "Yeah, Houston, I got a little problem with my seat belt. We need to readjust it here real quick." And in the meantime, he jumps off. He grabs this rock, puts it in the moon buggy, and comes back, and it turns out to be the most important specimen that they got from the lunar surface. So, if that wasn't real, then that is one of the most amazing stories that you get to hear and have someone come up with. So I do believe that we did go to the moon. Yes?
What were the main emotions you felt when you were told that you were going to be able to go to outer space?
That's funny. We were just talking about that. So this was a dream of mine from my days in high school. That was the early days of the shuttle program, and they used to actually take us all into the gymnasium, and on the old TV they would show you the launch and the people working up in space. So that got the dream alive for me, and it was so as I went into the Air Force and got into flight test, that was something I was always pursuing. And one of the things about that, when you start to go down that path, there's a process associated with it, and it usually involves an interview. And if you get an interview, you're going to get a phone call, right? At the end of the day, there's going to be a phone call associated with that. And so that's a big a big deal, right? And so I got on my fourth attempt, so I had 4 tries, my first 3. I do have rejection letters from NASA, and didn't even get an interview. And so on my 4th try, I finally got an interview, and so I knew I was going to get a phone call. And so, but you never know when it's going to come. And that's the funny thing. It is a long process. It was a 2-year process from the time I applied to when I found out that I was finally selected for it. And so, actually, I got a message because I wasn't at my desk when the call came in. This is before everybody carried cell phones everywhere. And so I had a message, so I went and called, and it was the chief of the astronaut office. And that's the thing. If you knew you had a call from the chief of the astronaut office, that's a good sign. If you had a call from HR, that's a bad sign. And so the great thing was, I can remember exactly where I was. I can remember I was in the central courtyard of the Pentagon. And that's when I called up, and the chief of the office said, "Mike, how'd you like to come work in Houston?" And then from there, I don't know, you're kind of blown away that that's reality. But it was funny, the other part of the story I was telling earlier, I mean, that's a big deal. It's a dream, it's something you've been dreaming about. What I didn't realize is when they actually assign you to a mission, that is even a different feeling, because it's like, oh my gosh, you've been there for a little bit, and now it's like they actually intend to send me to space. Before you feel like you're just kind of getting to play astronaut, and then all of a sudden the chief of the office calls you in and says, I'm assigning you to this mission. You're going to launch in September of 2013, and anyway, so that was even a little bit more mind-blowing. But then the last thing I got to tell on that story, and I'm not throwing my wife under the bus, but it is a funny story. So I took my family out, my wife and my 2 sons out to dinner, and told them that I had been assigned. And the first words out of my wife's mouth were, we need more life insurance. And so, believe it or not, it's hard to get life insurance for an astronaut. So it took a little work to make that happen. Yeah, go ahead.
What kept you so invested through Pike, like throughout your whole life? I mean, you didn't have to, bring that stuff up. I just kind of wondered why you did. I look back at my time at the University of Illinois. That is a very special time in any person's life, right? I mean, it's a time in your life when, one, you've left home, right? So now you're getting to make some of the decisions. You're kind of in this crossroads between being I'll call it a full-blown adult, and being someone that's still living in your parents' house. And so there's a lot of growing up that happens during that time. There's a lot of maturity that happens during that time, and I it just couldn't have been a better experience for me. So I was playing football at the University of Illinois. I was studying aerospace engineering, and I was in Air Force ROTC, and I was a member of the Pi Kappa Alpha fraternity, the Pikes. And it's kind of interesting because people always ask, how did you handle all of that? And the reality is, it's just about setting your priorities, right? And you've got to set your priorities, and my priorities were school, Air Force ROTC, football, and then Pikes. Now, when I say that doesn't mean that Pikes wasn't important for me. In fact, on a week-to-week basis, you're constantly shuffling your priorities around. Like during the week would be school, so that on Saturdays that was dedicated to football. But Pikes were probably the glue that held it all together for me. And what do I mean by that? It was because, my days would be pretty long. I'd be up in class. How many of you like to have the 8 o'clock class, right? Probably not a lot of you are real thrilled about those. But I always had to have my class at 8 so that I can be at the football stadium by 1. You get home after football around 7:30 at night. You'd be right to the library to study. But no matter what, if I came home and I had a half an hour and I was looking for a half an hour just to relax, to chill a little bit, there would be a brother sitting there that would be willing to sit down and spend some time with you. And so that piece of it for me was extremely important because it lets you just kind of reset and have some fun. And so I just don't think I'd be here today if I hadn't had that part of my college experience. And so it means a lot to me. And so, like I said, it was an easy decision to call up Justin and say, hey, can I take something up from Pikes? Yeah. Let me get some folks in the back. You guys are And right in my face, yeah, I don't mean that in a bad way.
So I have two questions, I guess, regarding space. First, I feel that there's a lot of people who think that it's technology being used today to get humans to space is being pushed almost to its limits. What do you think would have to be the next advancement in technology to further space?
So that's an interesting question. So I had the privilege of flying on SpaceX's Crew Dragon, right, Elon Musk, and that's probably, the question I probably get asked the most for my mission in space on this last mission is, did you meet Elon Musk? Have you met Elon Musk? And why do I say that? Well, 10 years ago, no one would have thought we would be where we are today, and a big part of that is because of the vision that Elon Musk had for SpaceX and for how he's going to change, and he has changed the launch industry, and that's a big deal. So when you sit there and whoever would have thought that we would have been landing rockets, first stage boosters on ships in the middle of the ocean and then bringing them back and using them again and again and again. The rocket that I launched on has already flown, I think it's like 5 times, right? And I haven't been back that long. So even though the technology, there is still room to continue to grow, to improve, and he has done that with SpaceX. You're seeing it with Blue Origin. You're seeing it with Virgin Galactic. I got to tell you, right now is an extremely exciting time in the human spaceflight business. We oftentimes get asked about, you saw William Shatner and Bezos and those folks going into space, and what do we call them, right? Are they astronauts? Are they not astronauts? And I kind of have a different opinion of it. I'm like, what a great problem to have. If that's what we're worrying about, is what we're going to call William Shatner, hell, you call him captain. I mean, he's Captain Kirk. That's what I know him as. So, it's a great time. And I think we're just now scratching the surface of. Wait till you see what SpaceX has got dreamed up for getting to Mars. This spaceship, Starship is what they call it. It's huge. They want to take 100 people at a time, and so we're not done by any means.
Thank you. And then I guess my last question is, you may hate me for this, but aliens, do they exist?
Do aliens exist? Yeah. That's probably the second most asked question that I get is, do aliens exist? You know what? One of the things I will mention is before I launched on my first mission in 2012, I converted to Catholicism. My wife and kids are Catholic. And I felt like, this is kind of an interesting part of the story, right? Here I am, I've finally been selected as an astronaut, I've been assigned to a mission, I've got 2 wonderful sons, a beautiful wife, and I felt like something was missing. And that was my relationship with Jesus. And so I converted to Catholicism, and I was able to take the Eucharist up with me. And so once a week I was able to receive communion. I received communion before I went out on my spacewalks. It was very important for me. And so when you ask that question, oftentimes I'll get asked the question about, if you believe in God, how can you believe in aliens, right? And for me, I sit there and when you're up in space and you get to look out and when you get to see the number of stars that are out there and the number of galaxies and it's hard to imagine that there are not aliens out there. And does that conflict with my faith in God? Nope, because if God wants to, if He wants to put aliens somewhere out there, that's up to Him. It's not up to me. So I have not seen any, but do I believe they're out there? Yeah, I think they are.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Yeah, you bet. All right, who else has a question? Anybody in the back? Otherwise, I'm going to go right up here to the front. Okay, is that your question? No.
How was your first spacewalk?
How was the first spacewalk? Okay, that's a great question as well. One of the things you guys are going to learn as you graduate and you go out through life, the experiences that you have right now are going to impact how you live your life and what you do in ways that you can't imagine. So on my first spacewalk, I am in the airlock. It takes about 5.5, 6 hours to get dressed and get in the airlock, get all your tools on you, and get the airlock down to vacuum. And so I'm there, and you're looking out this hatch, and you're looking down at the Earth, 250 miles below you, and again, you're going 17,000 miles an hour, so it takes about 5 minutes to go across the U.S. And you're sitting there looking out at that, and you're like, what in the world am I doing, right? There's a lot of emotions that are going through your mind at that point in time. As you can imagine, you're very excited. It's something that most astronauts want to do is be able to go out into the vacuum of space, but you're also pretty nervous, you're pretty focused. So there's a ton of emotions that are going through your mind. And as I'm looking out that hatch, I realized that I'd been there before. I'd been there a lot. And where that was is standing in the tunnel, getting ready to run out on a football field. Because quite frankly, it's a lot of the same emotions before a big game, right? I mean, you're getting ready to run out on the field at Michigan in front of 110,000 people, and you got a lot of those same kind of emotions, right? You're getting ready to go from this area of relative safety to the field of battle, if you will, and lay it all on the line. You're getting ready to cross this threshold, and so the fact that I had been through that for 5 seasons at Illinois, I took an extra season, so just so you know, I took an extra semester to graduate. But anyway, so I realized I'd been there before, and that helped me get out the door and do a spacewalk. And when I was standing in the tunnel at Illinois, I never would have thought that was going to help me do a spacewalk, but it certainly did. Yeah, great question.
Let's do one more.
One more question. Okay, who's got it? Anybody? No? Okay, there it is. I see it.
So when you get back from space, did you ever find yourself like, if you're drinking coffee or something like that,
Yeah.
and just let it go?
Let it go. So the question is, when I got back from space, did I ever find myself just no, because I don't drink coffee. I'm actually a tea guy, believe it or not. Don't hold that against me, but no, I didn't find that. But it is interesting when you get back. One of the things that's very interesting is when you're on the space station for 6 months, you forget how much stuff weighs, and so you exercise when you're up there for that 6 months, and so your muscles are just as strong. You may have lost a little bit of bone density, but you're in pretty good shape. In fact, sometimes you're in better shape, because who has 2 hours a day dedicated to working out? Not many of us, right? So you're in good shape, but you just pick up a water bottle and you don't know, what is this? How does it weigh so much? And so your arm will be shaking as you're just trying to pick up the water bottle and have a drink for it. So the adaptation when you get back from 6 months in microgravity is definitely pretty challenging. It's kind of like being a toddler all over again, having to learn how to walk. You got this inner ear that's helping us stabilize down here in the 1G environment. And when it hasn't had that reference for 6 months, when it gets back, it's all freaked out, and so that's pretty challenging. A lot of astronauts will get sick when you first get back, physically sick, throwing up, and all of those kind of things. So I've certainly heard of astronauts that have done that have dropped things, but I talk about just being able to learn to walk. I mean, believe it or not, if I was standing here and I just landed and I needed to walk through that hallway, the odds are I'm gonna misjudge it, and I'm gonna hit the edge, the corner there, and fall over. That happens quite a bit. So very challenging, but at the same time, again, incredible experience going to space. It's I can't describe it enough. But coming back, like I said, is even better. All right, so I talked a little bit about the leadership piece, and I'm going to kind of talk about my last. I talked about having your kind of core principles that you stick with as a leader. My other one, my third one, is to always be honest, and sometimes that's not easy as a leader, because sometimes that means admitting you didn't do it right, that you made mistakes, and I've had those. And so it goes all the way back to my time at Illinois. I was a captain of my football team my senior year at the University of Illinois, and we went. This was back when you only played 11 games in a season, and we went 6-5 my senior year. Did make a bowl game, but we lost that bowl game, and so out of those 6 losses that we had, 5 of them were by less than a touchdown. And quite frankly, that was a failure of leadership on our part as the captains of that football team, as the leaders of that football team, because there gets a point in that fourth quarter where you need to dig a little deeper, you need to have a little bit of grit, and it's just one of those things, right? I mean, you think about the days of Tom Brady at the Patriots, right? And you just knew in the fourth quarter that he was going to pull it out, and we didn't have that at Illinois, and I look at that as a failure of leadership. So it's not always easy to be honest with yourself that there's going to be mistakes. You guys are young, and in this leadership role, you probably haven't been doing it a lot of years, and I've been doing it now for a lot of years, and even on this mission, I made mistakes. I had a point where Victor and I were up on station, and we were doing some science. And it was, believe it or not, we were working on mice. We were dissecting mice. And so the two of us have our hands in the glove box, and because you don't, as you're dissecting the mice, you don't want to have all of the blood and the fur and those kind of things floating around the space station. So you're kind of trapped in this environment with your hands through the glove box, and you're doing the dissection of mice. And our comm was limited, and some things were going on, and it got frustrating, and I let those frustrations come out. And Victor and I had an agreement between ourselves that if we felt like one of us was taking something a little too far, all the other one had to say was take a knee. And that would just kind of cause you to, okay, wait, maybe I'm pushing this too much or too far. And it was one of those cases where I needed to say take a knee, and I didn't, and I got frustrated, and then that frustration came out, and it went down a path that I really wish it hadn't gone. But at the end of the day, we sat down and we talked about it, and I had to, again, that's that being honest with yourself part, that you do have to stand up when you make a mistake, and that was a mistake on my part, and the good thing is when you're honest, it's easier to get through those mistakes and move on. And so I was able to do that, and to this day, Victor is definitely one of my closest friends. It's when you go to space, when you depend on each other for staying alive, you definitely develop a certain bond, and you guys are developing very similar types of bonds with your fraternities, but in order to do that, just don't be afraid to be honest with your brothers, because that's another big piece of it. So thank you very much. I got to tell you, it is great to be here. I can't believe this is the first time I have been in this building. There is so much history here, and the great thing is all of you are becoming a part of that history. And so I look forward to the day when I'm back here as one of these old guys, and listening to one of you guys tell about your stories of life after Pikes and all of that. So thank you very much.